Welcome to the Crawcast. I'm your host, George Krawczak, and today I'm ranking every single new head coach in the 2025 NFL season. So we are ranking them from worst to best hire. And I want to preface this with, real quick with all these coaches were hired for as head coaches for a reason. So I think they are all capable and they're all probably fairly decent. These are just my rankings on who I think is the best to worst. And I also want to say I kind of take coaches into two categories: the players coach and the play caller coach. So, first off is the players coach, where they're not necessarily the best play callers. Like, you wouldn't really want them as an offensive or defensive coordinator, but they are motivators and they are leaders. I'd kind of classify this as Dan Campbell, where Dan Campbell, the farthest he made up coaching was a tight ends coach for the Saints. So I don't think anyone would really want him as an offensive or defensive coordinator, but he is a leader and he is a motivator. He gets all the players that want to win for him and win with him. They believe in his message and they believe he will take them to the Super Bowl. So that's kind of one half of coaching is the not necessarily the greatest play callers, but the motivators and the players coaches where the players believe in them so much and they want to win and they're real locker room guys. And then on the other half, I would say you have the play caller coach, where this one I would class as Bill Belichick, where Bill Belichick, he's not really a motivating guy. He's a man of few words, but he knows the best plays. He is an expert at defense, and he just knows how to run everything. Where you're like, wow, if he's not a head coach, he's one of the best coordinators in the NFL. I'd kind of classify Andy Reid as that as well. So those are kind of the two separate categories, and I think both work in their own way. And so now that that's kind of settled, let's get into it. At number 7, I have Brian Schottenheimer. This hiring kind of doesn't make a lot of sense to me because I think they should have probably just kept Mike McCarthy. To give Brian credit, he was their offense coordinator for the past 2 years, and last year their offense was really good, and this year their offense struggled a bit, but I feel like that wasn't really his fault because the Cowboys struggled with tons and tons of injuries. And this one doesn't make sense to me, whereas I felt like they should have just kept Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, I felt like was a really good coach and a really good head coach. And his main issue is he couldn't get past the playoffs. He couldn't get to the Super Bowl. He kept making the playoffs, kept going about 12-5 or 12-4, and really couldn't get past the playoffs. The one thing about Mike McCarthy, though, is you saw when he got fired, a lot of players were super against it, so you can tell he was really liked in the locker room. So if you say, okay, it's not really a locker room thing, it is a coaching thing. Mike McCarthy is clearly the problem, and he can't get us over the hump to the Super Bowl. So why not go with someone from the outside? I don't get why you'd hire Mike McCarthy's offensive coordinator, and Mike McCarthy is an offensive kind of mastermind, an offensive guru. So will Brian Schottenheimer be any different than Mike McCarthy? I really don't know. And also, like I said, Mike McCarthy was very well liked by almost all the players on the Cowboys, and who knows if Brian will be or not. So again, this one kind of really made no difference, or didn't make sense to me. Where it's like, if you're kind of getting someone similar to Mike McCarthy, why not just keep Mike McCarthy, who has the head coaching experience and is well liked in the locker room? Again, this one just didn't really make sense to me. He seems like a good, capable offensive coordinator, but again, why not just keep Mike McCarthy? And if you need a fundamental change to try to get out of the rut you're in of just making it to the playoffs, get someone from outside the organization. At number 6, I have Kellen Moore, and this one I kind of went a little bit back and forth on because he does seem like a really great coach. Uh, Everywhere he goes, he succeeds. Where he's offensive coordinator of the Cowboys' offense looks good. He's offensive coordinator of the Chargers, their offense looks good. He's offensive coordinator of the Eagles, they look good and win the Super Bowl. The only issue I have with him is it's tough to tell how much is him versus the team because he's never really gone to a bad team and made them great. He just kind of joins super teams that are really good and have great offenses, and he seems to just make them better. So it's tough to me on how much credit he deserves versus not deserves. And so this will be the real test of the Saints. The issue is with the Saints team, they're not a very good team. I believe last time I checked, they're like 40 or 60 million dollars in like under the or sorry over the cap. So they're going to need to cut quite a few players and restructure contracts. On defense, they basically have an aging Demario Davis and an aging Cameron Jordan as their only two key pieces. And then on offense, you can say Derek Carr maybe is a key piece because he did look really good last year, although he was mostly injured. When he did play, he did look good. And then you have an aging Elvin Kamara, and that's about it. I just think this whole Saints team is just a complete mess, and it's really gonna kind of tell if Kellen Moore is a great coach or not. Because again, they have no money, they don't really have any stars, they definitely don't have young stars. Chris Olave, I do think classifies as a young star, but who knows what's going on with him? Because I did see like a report that he might even be considering retirement because of his concussion issues. So who knows? This will be a major test for Kellen Moore, and we'll see if he can handle it. At number 5, I have Aaron Glenn. So again, he's also another one I go back and forth on, where I'd consider him more of a player's coach instead of an actual play calling defensive coordinator coach, because he really hasn't been that good of a defensive coordinator. I think he does deserve a lot of credit from last year. Last year they dealt with a lot of injuries and their defense was the Lions defense was pretty decent. But also on the flip side, you do have to look at it. The Lions had one of the best offenses in NFL history. So when you have one of the best offenses in NFL history, that means that's going to force the other team to be in more obvious passing situations. When your offense keeps scoring, they're going to need to try to keep up with that. So once you know the other team's going to pass, then all of a sudden makes the defense coach or calling the defense much easier. So I do think he does deserve quite a bit of credit though because they were injured and he did seem to do a good job last year. But other than last year, the Lions defense over the previous few years has been near the bottom of the league in almost every category. And to me that just doesn't seem like a good coach. But here's the big but. There was a poll that came out last year where every single player in the NFL ranked their coordinators, and he was the number one most liked coordinator in the NFL. So I do think that brings a lot of positive energy where he can be a coach or a player's coach. They can get behind him and his message, and he can kind of lead a team and make sure there's good morale on the team. The one thing I don't like, though, is that they did get rid of Aaron Rodgers. I don't think that move makes a lot of sense, especially for this year, because they are at the point where it does seem like they are talented enough and a lot of their players are cheap enough where they can be in Super Bowl contention. They have Quinnen Williams, who is really great on defense. They have Sauce Gardner, who, even though he struggled a bit last year, still seems like a top corner who's on a rookie contract. They have Garrett Wilson, who's a top receiver, who I believe is also on a rookie contract. They have Devontae Adams and Breece Hall is a really good running back. So it does seem like they are a team that might be a quarterback away and a little bit better coaching to a Super Bowl. And so I thought it was a mistake getting rid of Aaron Rodgers for that reason. And also kind of a little bit of the principle of it in the sense that you've traded I know there was some pick swaps, but it was effectively 2 second-round picks for Aaron Rodgers. And for those 2 second-round picks, you get one season where he doesn't play because of injury, and then one season where he's kind of average to above average in the league. And so again, I think they should have kept him and go for it because they really aren't in a position to get a quarterback because there's basically two quarterbacks, Shadir Sanders and Cam Ward. And you look at it, you have the Titans picking at number 1, who probably need a quarterback. You have the Browns picking at number 2, who need a quarterback. You have the Giants picking at 3, who need a quarterback. The Patriots at 4, and the Jaguars at 5 don't. You have the Raiders at 6, who need a quarterback. And so the Jets at 7 are kind of nowhere near the top where they can get one of those two. So like, and there's not really a guy like a reclamation project like a Sam Darnold where you can say, oh, let's give him a shot. I can only think of maybe Daniel Jones, but I don't know if you really want Daniel Jones to be that guy. And so again, I think it was a mistake getting rid of Aaron Rodgers, and I do think this could be a good team because if you look at last year, they weren't. It feels like they're kind of the reverse Chiefs, where the Chiefs they kept getting into close games and somehow winning, and you keep saying, "Wow, this team is definitely not as good as the record says," but they keep somehow finding a way to win. Whereas the Jets were the reverse of that, where it's like they kept getting in close games and they kept somehow losing. And you kept looking at the team and saying, this team is definitely better than their record, but they just keep somehow managing to lose games. And I broke it down last year, and I can't remember if this is correct or not, but I think they have either been one game away from playoffs or maybe might have made the playoffs if their kicker just made their field goals. So again, I thought it was a mistake, especially since you don't really have anyone to replace him with. I think it was a mistake getting rid of Aaron Rodgers, but we'll see what Aaron Glenn can do. Again, I think he's a good motivator and a good team players coach. I just don't think he's that great of a defensive coordinator. So that is why he is at 5. At number 4, you have Liam Cohen, the Jacksonville Jaguars coach. Again, I'm a little on the fence about him because you have to look at him as two parts. Again, the play calling coach and the uh, personality coach. As a play caller, he seems like a really great coach. He was the Rams offensive coordinator in 2022. He was the Buccaneers offensive coordinator in 2024. The Rams had a great offense that year, and then the Buccaneers had a really great offense last year. I do think it might hurt him a little bit, and this might be a sign of things to come where I didn't like that he was kind of playing games with the Jaguars and the Buccaneers and kind of flip-flopping back and forth on either staying as the Buccaneers offensive coordinator or going to the Jaguars head coaching. And then it also seemed like he went silent on the Buccaneers right before he took the Jaguars head coaching job. And so to me, that seems like traits that worry me when it comes to a leader of the locker room or a coach that can get everyone on board and support a team. But in the play calling, he seems like a really, really great play caller and a really good young offensive mind in the NFL. And so again, a lot of these are kind of like wait and see because all these guys I think have the capability of doing great and all these guys have the capability of doing terrible. And so again, we'll just see. Those are just kind of some of the positives and some of the negatives of him. At number 3 for the Raiders is Pete Carroll. I really like the coach. I just don't like the team he's going to. So Pete Carroll has been a really, really great NFL coach. And I do think he was kind of forced out of Seattle because he is old. And I do think he is still a great coach and still has a lot left in him. And I think he's one of those guys where I think it would have been kind of perfect for the Jets in the sense that I think he can make a team that's already pretty decent just better and provide better coaching expertise that can allow a team to win. I just don't think he's the right fit for the Raiders because if you look at the Raiders, they're in complete rebuild mode. On offense, they have basically Brock Bowers and nobody else. That's their only star on offense. And then on defense, they basically just have Max Crosby. And Max Crosby might get traded because it seems like he kind of wants out. And there's been rumors he might want to go to Green Bay or some place like that, but he seems like he might want out. And so, just because Pete Carroll is so old, he's the oldest coach in the NFL, how many years do you have of him? Maybe 3, maybe 4 years of Pete Carroll. And I think it's going to take longer than 3 to 4 years to completely rebuild the Raiders, especially since they're really not in contention for a quarterback because they're at number 6, and like with the Jets, I kind of listed the teams ahead of them. They could trade up, that is certainly a possibility, but again, I think he's a really great coach, and I think he can provide a lot of experience and expertise because he did take the Seahawks to 2 Super Bowls and was, again, a really great coach for the Seahawks for the longest time. He helped rejuvenate Geno Smith. He really helped Russell Wilson. Again, a great coach. I just think the timeline is the issue because he's so old. Again, you only have probably maybe 4 years of him before he decides he wants to go, and that just doesn't seem like enough time for the Raiders to rebuild with him. But again, other than that, really, really great coach. At number 2 is Mike Vrabel. Uh, for the Patriots. Again, he's one of those coaches where he was great with Texans as their defensive coordinator, and he was great in the Titans as their head coach. He was forced out of the Titans, not because he was a bad coach, but because he had kind of disagreements with management. He has shown he can be a great leader and a great play caller. Again, he was a really good coach with the Titans, bringing them to those playoffs with a really subpar roster all those years. And I believe making it to the championship game 1 or 2 years. I think it was just 1 year he made the championship game. But again, he has shown that he can make work with subpar rosters. And so Drake May has been looking really good. Again, it's all like in relative terms because Drake May looked pretty good last year in terms of he had nobody around him and an absolutely horrible team, and he looked average during that. And so that's kind of the best you can ask for. So Mike Vrabel, I think, can do a really great job coaching them up and be a real players guy because that's what they're needed with the coach. Because Gerard Mayo seemed like more of a players guy, and since all he was the linebackers coach, he didn't really have any play calling or defensive coordinator experience, and they need an actual true play caller with experience. And so I do think it is going to be a multi-year rebuild, and it's also going to be tough because their division is pretty good. But I think Mike Vrabel is the right guy to lead them, and I think can help them potentially go to a Super Bowl. And at number one is Ben Johnson. I think by far he is one of the best offensive minds in the NFL. The one thing that does concern me a little bit is his personality because again, it could have just been one of those situations where since the Lions kept making it so far, Ben Johnson was like, okay, my options left, for example, last year were the Commanders and the Seahawks. And he could have just saw those two and said, nope, not for me. Don't really like those two teams, so I'm going to stay with the Lions. Or he could just see himself as just not a head coach guy, because there are some people like that. It kind of reminds me of Vic Fangio, where brilliant, brilliant defensive mind, probably one of the best in NFL history, but he was just not like head coaching material. And so that could be the issue with Ben Johnson. He just doesn't see himself as like head coaching material. But I do think Ben Johnson will be a great play caller, and the Bears have a pretty good team. Their offensive line is not very good, but Ben Johnson's worked with DeAndre Swift before, and he's pretty good. Great receiver in DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, potentially Keenan Allen. He may or may not come back. And then Caleb Williams, even though he was inconsistent, he did at least show some flashes that he is able to lead a football team and be a great quarterback. And that's, I think, what you need is because at some point flashes just say, okay, that's just it, flashes, and you need to show consistency. But at least he's shown he's able to potentially be a good quarterback. And he hired Dennis Allen as the defensive coordinator. So I think again the Bears are definitely going to be dangerous, and Ben Johnson will probably be a really great head coach. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this type of content, make sure to hit that subscribe button like it owes you money, and I'll see you on the next one.